Welcome to the live streaming viewers as well. Let's see. Let's wait just a minute or so, and then we will be on the way. We already have Marcelo here. He was here right on time, actually, a little before time. Mhm. Those of you just joined, folks, we were again just waiting for you. Let's actually get rolling. We have audience here. We also have the audience on the live streaming platforms. It is also slightly sort of late for East Coast and possibly some other time zones as well. So without further ado, let's get going. Marcelo, welcome. Thank you for giving us your time.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course, would you mind starting with a bit of an intro about yourself? I think everybody would love to know.
Yeah, so I am a machine learning engineer. I have been working with software development. I have my background is software development. I got my bachelor's in 2008. Then I jumped into in software engineering and then computer science. And then I've been working with backend as full stack engineer as well since then. And since I started my master's in, I finished my master's in 2012 in applied informatics, neural networks, and I have been working with machine learning hands-on since 2017. So I've been working with many different kinds of companies, small companies, medium-sized companies, big companies. The highlight being Apple, that I've worked in California for a couple of years before moving back to Canada.
Fascinating. So you are in Canada at the moment.
Yeah, right now.
You work in Canada at the moment. Awesome.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you, folks. My name is Soham. I am going to be hosting the session today. I'm one of the two founders of Kickstart. My background has also been in software engineering, bachelor's, master's in software engineering. Incidentally, my bachelor's project as well as my master's project was in machine learning at the time, many years ago. In fact, more than 20 years ago. Yes, there was machine learning that time as well. It was not sort of as hot, but it was still really cool and fun to do. I actually also started my PhD in AI, but I did not complete it. I actually dropped out in my very first year after my master's, simply because I had to support folks back home, and I couldn't otherwise on a PhD. It wasn't that fashionable, I suppose. But yes, that was sort of my background, and before running Kickstart, I was at Box. I was a director of engineering at Box. Box, some of you might know, is an enterprise cloud storage company. Nothing to do with AI. Now they are going big into AI. But I was at Box very early, very fortunate to be very early. I was their fifth engineer. And when I left, they had filed for IPO at the time. And I was the director of engineering there. Now, before Box, I worked at eBay. I've also worked at Microsoft. And I worked at a startup as well, which very royally actually shut. But anyway, I've been a bit around the block, but I'm very excited about AI. AI today, the latest developments, especially in the last couple of years, have been really good. My work in AI was sort of less modern compared to Marcelo's work. It's sort of year 2000, 2001. It's like very simple, so to speak. I mean, simple from today's standard. I think a very simple backprop algorithm that I had implemented. But the project was really, really cool. I used to work in defense in India. Indian Space Research Organization actually does defense work. Some of you may or may not know. I used to work for them, and they recently launched the thing to moon, Chandrayaan to moon. But anyway, so at that time the project was we were given remotely sensed data. There were satellites going around even at that time, and we were given pictures, and we had to identify Indian Navy ships by scanning those pictures. There's pictures of everything. We had to figure out that this was a picture of an ocean, and within that ocean, this was a ship and not like a small island or whatever else, or a cloud or whatnot. And among those ships, this was an Indian Navy ship, and we had to identify with a fairly high accuracy. Turns out I learned something really, really interesting besides obviously backdrop algorithm. What I also learned at the time was that all Navy ships in different countries, they all come with a signature, and like, so the signature is in the wake of the ship. Right? What's the wake of the ship? When the ship goes and leaves a trail of water behind, that there is a signature inside that trail of water. Anyway, so we had to identify that. Call it computer vision in today's forms, but it's sort of very, very rudimentary at the time. Anyway, Marcelo, I'm very, very excited to have you here. Let's talk about your career. Folks, the format is going to be pretty straightforward today. I'm going to ask Marcelo a few questions for the next, say, about 20 minutes or so. And then we'll open it up to Q&A. Yeah. I would love to take your questions and say, share your curiosity about AI careers. Right? All right. Marcelo, could you tell us a little bit about the work you do today in AI? Or you may have done as well in the past, like sort of generally, where is your head at in AI today?
So right now I am working with NLP applications. Since I came back to Canada September 2021, that I've been working with NLP, and always in that for NLP in the area of document classification and information extraction. It's basically the problem that you have. Let's say a company has a problem that they have to process documents. They have a stream of documents coming in, and they have to take information out of that document and save into a database, like key information. Like, let's think about a company that process invoices, and they all come from different clients and different suppliers, and they all have their own format, and you need to know what is the amount, what are the products, what is the company name, what is the date of that. So I worked in solutions. One of the solutions that I worked in my past company was to automate that with a human in the loop process as well. So just create a system that was going to help the human instead of them having to manually go through the document and tag everything. We just highlight some of the information that we have identified that are the information that they're interested in. Let's say the date and the amount and the name of the company and the products. They just have a better system to select those things rather than just having to type everything by hand, right? It's similar to the work that I'm doing right now. It's also document processing, but because now there's new models that have come out since GPT has started, we are doing that with a lot more. It's a lot more powerful in terms of that. We can ask questions about, like, sentiment questions about the document as well for those models, and they're capable of interpreting it with a lot more accuracy than they used to be a few years ago.
Fascinating. Folks, I forgot to mention, Marcelo also is an instructor in ML with us. But anyway, that's on the side. Marcelo, very curious. Do you build your own model with your own data from scratch, or do you largely use existing models to do your work with the document processing model?
Normally using existing models, even before, and the work that I did with Apple as well is using models that have been developed, in the case of Apple, by other teams at Apple that we use as a base model for the model that I was developing. And it's the same thing that I did with other models too, both in computer vision. I mostly use large base models that have been trained with a gigantic corpus of data, and we just fine tune to the data that we want, and we just repurpose the model to do the other task that we wanted to do. That's slightly different than the task that was originally trained for.
Fascinating. Yeah, NLP applications have become very effective these days. Like, if I think of like inputs, text as an input, say image as an input, say voice as an input, and video as an input. If I sort of so almost in layman terms, if I classify potential modes or inputs in 4 categories, like text, image, voice, and video, it seems like text and images have practically almost been conquered, so to speak, where you can just now do really anything with them. For most sort of first level commercial applications, like it's difficult to imagine to interpret, say, research papers in depth, for example, still, but first level interpretation is like there, like the summarizing, the understanding correlations, and the organization of how the documents are written, what to produce in terms of generative next word, like all that seems to have been like conquered by now. Just to using a word, voice not so much yet, and video is a little bit further away. Voice also, like, gone file. You need an engineer to conquer it, like versus to the other things. And anyway, very exciting. I imagine going to a world where I can search all the documents in my Gmail and ask questions to say how many contracts expired in the last 30 days, and it just tells me exactly that. Right?
You're getting closer and closer to that, right? That is because this last one, like NLP, was trailing behind for a while until Transformers came about. Right?
Yes.
Transformers architecture came about and just like turned everything upside down. Transformers also applies to computer vision. So there was lots of algorithms like stable diffusion and others like that came after Transformers that also made a big revolution. And before that, there was, if you think about the deep learning boom, I think in 2013, 2014, that was because of convolutional networks was also something that was invented back then, and that gave a big boost to computer vision. That's how I started working with ML, is when I had my master's, but I didn't have, I haven't worked in the industry yet. And then there was convolutional network boom came about, and everyone was hiring people to work with machine learning, and applications started appearing out of nowhere just because there was this breakthrough that came up, and I took that opportunity and just like apply for a job that was the small startup that was here in Toronto. That was hiring. That's how I started working with computer vision.
Fascinating. I was going to exactly ask you that, like, what was your very first project? So it was in CNN.
Yes.
And very interesting. And I suppose many of us didn't even notice CNN coming in. Like those who were not active in the field at the time didn't even notice that convolutional neural networks came in and had an impact on vision, and that created a lot of opportunities. And we have noticed GPT though. We have noticed the transformer, not in its raw form, but once the large models came about, and Sam Altman put a chat on the last one, I think then everybody noticed on that.
Yeah, but
And
that's because of the ChatGPT
yeah,
one, right? Because the transformers
yes,
came about like a couple of years before ChatGPT, and nobody
yes,
noticed.
17, I think. Nobody.
Yeah, and then when ChatGPT came in, everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is gonna take over the
Yes,
world."
take over the world. Yes, and these days it's just like left and right. People are just like talking about AI. But it's quite a thing. Um, so when you applied for roles, do you know if people had reservations hiring you? I'm guessing not because you had some prior knowledge about it,
No, but
or
it's
maybe you had, but sort of how, if you could so go back and think about like what had happened, it'd be very useful to know.
yeah, this thing about ML is such a broad field. There's so
Mm,
many things you cannot know everything, right? The
mm,
reservations that people have normally is
mm,
that sometimes they're looking for someone that is very knowledgeable in the things that they're going to use on the projects they're going to start on projects that they already have running. So sometimes
mm,
when I apply for positions, um, there's a gap in the knowledge of what they want me to have and what I actually have,
mm, mm,
or I have something I know a bit, but it's been a while since I worked with it. Just have to, you know, give
mm,
brush up my knowledge before I go into the interview. So the gaps and the reservations come at that, I think, mostly because the field is very large.
mm,
Even if you
mm,
know the fundamentals, sometimes people are looking for a very specific person, very specific set of skills.
I see.
And if like even if you know, but you haven't been using it for a while, you get to the interview and you stuttered a little bit because you haven't been talking about what they're talking to you right there for a long time.
Mm,
And that's your only chance to shine and to tell them that you know, but then you stutter and it's not going to go well. So it's what I do normally is just like look into what is the team doing, what is the company doing,
mm,
and try to
mm,
get more, like learn a little bit more before I go,
mm.
just so they don't I don't I'm a little sharper when I get to talk to them.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So ML is a broad field, and I'm guessing you would do this even today if you had to switch. You would, given how broad the applications of this field are. Like
Yeah,
you, despite few years of experience in ML, you'd look at the company, you'd look at the product, you would possibly either talk to them in an informational way. Say somebody who conducted the phone screen. You talk to them and say like, "What the heck are you even doing there? Like, tell me and like help me understand," or just try and guess from their blog, or just trying to reverse engineer in your mind to say, documents type application. Maybe they are doing this and that. Like that is something that you possibly do, and then look it up, brush it up before you go to a to an interview.
yeah, it's
Um,
something that I always ask. Like
mm,
the recruiters sometimes have that kind of information. Like on the first
mm,
first call, just ask them, what is the team doing? What is the application, right?
mm,
So just they explain what they're doing, and then you kind of have an idea what they are looking for, right? If
mm,
if the interview is talking about, oh, they're going to help, I don't know, the search algorithm in the website, right?
mm,
So you go look into semantic search, you go look into recommendation, you go look at like just by what they tell you, what's the team going to work on, you kind of have an idea what you should like brush up before you go in there. But it's like very important, at least for me, to just ask them to have an idea, so I get to the interview a little more prepared.
makes sense. Makes sense. So that is actually a very very helpful tip. Talking a bit about today, what do you think it takes for a software engineer, which you were before you moved into the field, to move to the field um, today?
I I think it's a lot of, if you are passionate about ML, if it's machine learning is something that drives you, that makes you curious and makes you like, you know, read about it on your free time, or you do your own projects on your free time. That's important because the work that, even if you start working with it, the work that you're going to do is not going to cover everything. You have to keep yourself up to date, and it's moving really, really fast. So I think the most important thing that you need to have is you have to have the interest and the drive and the motivation, right? To go into it too. And I think that, and of course, when you go, like, want to have like the first work experience with it, you're gonna get there and try to convince someone you have no experience in the field that you're good to work there, right? That is a big hurdle. And I think it's interesting to have like courses like the IQ courses that you have is a good way of telling that you have some idea of what you're, you know, where you're talking about. So you break that first barrier that is put upon you when you don't have any experience, right? So I think it's important for that.
And I suppose you must have faced something like that also in the past. Like, I mean, you didn't have experience in the field when you had some courses in masters for it. Like, so you showed the projects, I'm guessing, to say, look, these are the things I've done. Like, I know these things, and obviously you tried to understand what the company is doing when you applied and such. So what you're saying is that a keen interest goes a long way, like, to say, given how fast the field is moving. If you don't have good interest in the field, it is going to be difficult to keep up. It might just feel like a drudgery for it. But if you have an interest in the field, then you will continue to keep up as time goes with it as well. Pretty much like software, I suppose. Right? Like when software came about, like it has exploded. Right? It's just like so many dimensions to this that one has to keep up, right? All the freaking time in different things. And if you don't keep up, the career just tends to stagnate. Right? Like others who have kept up, like generally get those roles which are more lucrative. And otherwise one is relegated to roles which are just sort of maintenance oriented roles and stuff like that, which seems to apply here as well in this one. Right?
Yeah, it's like for me, I was a full stack engineer before I became machine learning engineer. So that was that kind of thing. Like I worked with jQuery and then Angular and then React, and I have to, like, every couple of years I have to learn something, like a different paradigm to keep myself up to date. Machine learning is like that too. It's a little more intense than that even, because it's a little more dense in terms of, like, it's more content and it's more it's always like problems. It's also something that motivates me is the problems are problems that haven't been solved before, most of them. Like even if you're using models that are pre-trained and stuff like that, most of the problems are problems that even the company that are hiring you to solve something that it's totally new to the company, or build something, you know. So that's another thing that helps me to keep myself motivated too, because you, like, when you're working with machine learning, you're always like on that edge of the field, right?
And I have to ask, like, how do you keep up? Like, what is your method to keep up?
I do a lot of reading on I use Medium a lot for reading articles, and I don't read a lot of papers, but sometimes I do when I see that some papers are coming up and people are talking about it. But I read a lot of, like, digested content from people that will read a paper and will implement some code, and I read that. Papers with Code is also a site that helps me a lot with that, because it has a paper and has a code that goes together with it. And I receive a couple of newsletters in my email and on Substack that I used to read, and that not only technical but also a little more like philosophical and ethical parts of ML as well, that I think it's interesting to me too.
Makes sense, and that's actually a very important and useful thing. I do something similar. I'm not a practitioner in the field today, but like one way I keep up is I just went to Substack and subscribe to the newsletters that were popular in AI, and actually that has helped me quite a bit. Um, very interesting. Have you? I mean, thinking about these, like, have you seen a change in pace of hiring this year, which I'm guessing you have, like compared to when you had looked CNN? Have you seen this because of GPT, like we talk? I'm guessing you have, and in what ways have you seen, um, with your colleagues, friends, family, neighbors? Like, what should be your perception
It's
on
actually
this?
a little bit of a weird year with all the
Okay.
layoffs that happened
Hmm.
a few
Hmm.
months ago, like since, I don't know, end of last year, something like that.
Hmm.
But people are talking a lot about AI. I think at least what I'm seeing right now, the job market is still picking up on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
there is going to be a lot of opportunity for ML engineering and ML ops
Hmm. Hmm.
in specific, because you have a lot of those APIs that give you access to those models and give you access to do fine tuning. You don't need a lot of data science to do that. You need some knowledge, but you're going to need systems that are going to be built around those APIs, are going to be built around those new libraries. There's going to be I think, a lot of need for ML engineering and ML ops in the next,
Hmm.
I would say, until, I would say maybe until the end of the year to next year. That
Hmm.
it's still a little slow because of the economy, at least here in Canada and US, has been a little weird.
Right.
But I think as soon as things go back to normal, it's going to pick up in a very good pace.
Very good pace. Yeah, that's what we are seeing as well. In fact, at because interview Kickstart is like so entrenched in the job market, we saw it first when the market tightened. When nobody saw it, we saw it first in our numbers in January of like 22, 20, in January, February 22 is when we're like, what's going on?
That's really
Um,
early.
we
Yeah.
didn't we didn't really believe it for some time. I think it took us like April for us to believe it, that no, this is actually retrenching, obviously contracting. And on the flip side, we also saw it first come up. So April of this year, starting April of this year, like we have seen a steady climb up in people getting jobs and just more often negotiations. And like now I'm anecdotally, but I'm hearing more like multiple offers, which was just like not a thing for the last months, like more than a year. Like multiple offers was completely unheard of. And now I'm starting to see it. Um, and you're right. I mean, in our perception and such, from what we have seen, like you spot on. Like the AI jobs is like just like going up. Like even in my news feed, anecdotally as well, like people posting jobs, and like everywhere there is AI. I've also now, Marcelo, seen jobs which are like regular looking jobs, like regular software engineering jobs, and you wouldn't think of it as anything special, but you'd read the description and somewhere it says AI preferred, like knowledge of machine learning preferred. Like they don't call it a machine learning engineering job. Like that is like the biggest shocker for me. For last several months, this is happening. In it, so it's like as if people started to assume that you have cloud knowledge. Like it's not a cloud engineer knowledge, but like you're an engineer. You obviously know how to work with AWS or GCP or Azure or one of these things. Right? So it's sort of as if it is like completely assumed. And that is my next question as well. Like how transferable you think the sweet skills are, software engineering skills are, to the ML role? Like it, um, we generally say that ML engineering is just like software engineering. It's like engineering first and foremost, and then it is ML. Right? So it should have been called EML or something, not an MLE, for it. And what is your perception of that?
Yeah, it's the same too. Like it's like most of my time is solving software engineering problems than machine learning problems. But I need to have the machine learning knowledge so I can talk to data scientists, I can talk to other people that are machine on the same level, right? Or if I get like a proof of concept from a data scientist, I can read the code and I can understand what's going on there. If I didn't have machine learning knowledge, it would take me a long time to know what's going on, right? I would see the code, it's going to work, but I don't understand how information is passed around, how it's inputted into the model, how to digest the output of the model, those kind of things. But besides that, you have to build a system around it, and you have to know how that system is going to communicate with the other systems that are going to send information to it, the other systems that are consume the information that you are producing. Because most of the times the systems in machine learning are the middle of it. They're not the beginning and they're not the end either. They're not on the database side of things. They consume the data, but they're not the data. And they're not the front end side of things either. So they process, they are middle of the process. They process the data and they serve some other data to be consumed afterwards, right? So back-end engineering is very important there, or distributed systems kind of engineering. It's very important to machine learning engineering as well. How can you make like a lot of efficiency as well is important, because those models are heavy and they're going to take a long time. How can you scale your application? How can you build something that is going to be robust enough to be scaled and to run with like multiple instances, because the models are gonna extract the max out of it all the time, right?
Makes sense. And models can be large. So how do you train fast, I suppose? Right? And how do you infer fast and accurately as well in a more consistent way? And so you see that as a distributed system. At the end of the day, the principles of distributed system apply to build scale such a model, right? Depending on how much data you have.
Yeah, it is. Like there's a lot of race conditions too. If you have like your model running on, if you have like I don't know, 10, 15 instances of your model doing inferences at the same time, they're going to consume the same data and they're going to save to the same data source as well. So you have to make sure that they are not stepping on each other's toes. So there's a lot of distributed systems like fundamentals that are applied to machine learning engineering.
Makes sense. And so if a software engineer applies to becoming an ML engineer, let's say they have the ML skills and they're applying to becoming an ML engineer, they don't have to take a step down, right? Assuming they have these skills of building a system, race conditions, or whatever else is required for it. They don't have to take a step down in their career. Like say I'm a senior engineer, I'm applying, and I don't have to start from scratch. Do I have to compete with like fresh grads when I'm starting? I have like 7 years of experience. I'm 8 years, 10 years experience. I'm a senior engineer.
No, I don't think
really.
so. But maybe if you are like very, very, very senior, you may want to take some steps back. Like, but you're not going to go back to junior most of the time, right? Because your experience as a software engineer is going to be very, very valuable, because that's the kind of experience that you're going to use most of the time. But the knowledge of machine learning engineering is what enables you to be in that role and to talk to people on the same level, right? But the experience as a software engineer is what's gonna be the bread and butter of your everyday work, right?
I see. Oh, that's actually very well phrased. The experience of as a software engineer is going to be the bread and butter of the everyday work when it comes to machine learning engineering. Makes sense. I think that makes things very clear. And I agree with you. If you are, that's what we have also noticed. Like if you're like a principal engineer somewhere, and you're applying, you've never done production ML work, and applying as an ML engineer, it's unlikely that you can go as a principal engineer. You might have to take a step down and maybe go as a staff engineer or something.
Yes.
But
yes.
Right.
Probably not junior, because junior also is going to assume that you also don't have experience with software engineering either, like outside of the university, right?
Yeah. Awesome. ML careers in general, like once you get into ML, like these careers are you currently seeing ML careers growing sort of faster than say other careers as an engineer? I mean, there are multiple types of engineers. It's like if you reflect on your days back to Apple or even otherwise, and from what you know, right? A lot of people want to do ML today. Like, have you seen like careers fast track in ML?
Um,
It may or may not. I mean, just
when you say
question.
fast tracking, what is
As
fast
in,
tracking?
as in like, if I want to grow faster in my career, like, should I opt for ML engineering versus just stay as a software engineer? Say between the two. Right?
Yeah, I think that's more of, like, for me, it's more of a preference of like, if I would like to go into ML, if I would like to spend my time learning all the new things about ML, but at least for me, the two motivations. I'm more of a technical person, like individual contributor, engineer, rather than people manager. So I want to stay as an individual contributor, but the software engineering was like a little too every day, getting a little more of the same, right? And I saw that like machine learning was this up and coming thing, very interesting things that I keep reading about and keep wanting to go and work with that. With the plus that salaries are a little more skewed up a little bit with machine
It's a bit
learning
high,
engineering,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
you need more
Yeah.
specialized knowledge. So it's natural that they're going to pay more,
Right.
because
Right.
you need to be a more you need to spend more time to learn stuff that applies to machine learning engineer than you would just to be a software engineer, right? But I think those things were the things that made me move to the field. It's
Right.
more, it's something that would pique my interest of wanting to work with the problems that machine learning work, and wanting to learn what are the new developments that are coming.
Makes sense. And Marcelo, you've built an impressive career as an immigrant and like moving into this field fast. And like, I'm very, very happy, very happy for you. But yes, compensation is higher, but I think one very interesting thing you pointed out is that software engineering became slightly boring. It's almost more of the same type role. And so you're like, where do I go next? And like, here it is. It seems interesting, and sort of make me move. Fascinating, man. That's pretty good. That is very good. What are some different roles in this field? Like for example, we've heard of data scientists. Like, what does a data scientist do versus a machine learning engineer do, or other roles that you have seen, especially say in a larger setup, like say Apple, and possibly elsewhere as well, right? I mean, for people who are not daily practitioners in the field, like for them from outside, it is like machine learning engineer, data scientist, right? So two main roles. Yes, there is data engineer, there is data analyst, but they're not necessarily related to machine learning. I'm guessing they can be, not necessarily. So what are some flavors of different roles? Like, I mean, there's a 50% team on ML engineering. I'm guessing not everybody is doing the same thing. Right? Like, what are some different things that people do, but in an umbrella term, we would just call machine learning engineers or data scientists?
Yeah, I see three roles there. Besides data scientist and machine learning engineer, there's ML ops as well, which is a big one. Machine learning operations, which is sister with with DevOps, right? This the person who's more knowledgeable on, let's say, AWS or GCP, that can know how to get an application that is, I don't know, in a Python project in GitHub, and put that to run at scale, right? That would be the DevOps, MLOps person. That's sometimes it's very important to have someone in the team that knows there more than the other things. The machine learning engineering side of things is the person who knows software engineering and also knows the libraries that are used to do machine learning with. Let's say if you work with Python, you're gonna do a lot of pandas, you're gonna do a lot of PyTorch, a lot of NumPy, scikit-learn, those kind of libraries that you have been exposed to as a machine learning engineer, and you know how to work with them. But you also know how to build a system that is going to be reliable, it's going to be production ready, that's going to be scalable, and all the qualities of a regular like large scale software that is developed for production grade. While you have the data scientist who is more into math, who is more into the research kind of things, right? The data scientist is going to try a different model that's going to produce better results, or try a different knows about like this weird loss function that is going to work for this kind of data, or they know what kind of data this model is going to deal better in a task for fine-tuning a model, right? Or if we switch, if we tune the hyperparameter in this way or the other way, it's going to work better. The data scientist is the one who has knowledge on that side, mostly more knowledge on that side, a little bit of knowledge on software engineering, enough for them to make proof of concepts and make prototypes. That's going to be handed to the machine learning engineer to make like an actual like production grade software out of.
Got it. If you imagine a software engineering floor, right? Like there are front end engineers and there are back end engineers, and there are mobile engineers, and there are platform engineers, and there are DevOps engineers, and so like. Do you think as time goes in the future, do you think there's going to be like almost a one-on-one mapping in that configuration to like the world of ML, where some people will work in what one might call the front end of ML, some people would work in some might call the back end of ML, some people work in what we call the operations of ML, some people would work in what we might call just taking the ML model and putting it out to production, right? Like, is that how you see this morphing, or is it already there in larger teams?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure about that part though. It looks like the core of the machine learning team is a little more into that, like that side of backend. There's not a lot of people who work like with front end and specialize in front end machine learning. There is not a lot of that yet. Maybe that would change with the models that come out, but I think not even ChatGPT with all the like the chat UIs that come with it. You don't need a lot of machine learning knowledge to make a UI for a chatbot, let's say, right? So there is not a lot of like machine learning front end engineering. There is not a lot of like machine learning like data. There's a lot of data engineering, database engineering, but that is the job of data analysts and data engineering that you have mentioned before. Those can be part of the machine learning team too, right? Depending on how the company deals with data, or how much data you have, what is the flow, what is the throughput, those kind of things. Then you might need some data engineer and data analysts to work those things out too.
Got it.
But yeah, besides that, yeah, I don't see yet the front end coming into play. But there's a lot of data, there's a lot of engineering or like APIs and services on the side, and model development as well. But it stops there; it doesn't go all the way to the front end.
Got it. Awesome, man. I think that is actually very good. That is end of my curiosity at the moment. Let's take some audience questions, folks. I do see a few questions that have already come up. Please feel free to add more. What I'll do is I will read the question and then I'll ask Marcelo questions. I might skip a question or so if I feel like it has already been answered or such. And if you are on one of the streaming services and if you have questions, please put the questions there as well, and we'll be very, very happy to take. Right? Feel free to ask questions, and we'll go from there. Okay? And I'll prefer taking questions from the Q&A box just for the sake of efficiency, and so we can take more questions in the time that we have. Yeah, I anticipate taking questions for maybe like 15-20 minutes more, and then let's go from there. I also see a lot of questions come in anonymously. While that is okay, try to sort of name yourself in the answer in your question if you would like. It's just like helps me address you by the name, right? Otherwise I would just have to call you anonymous attendee, and all the anonymous attendees would be like, who's this addressed to? So and again, hopefully we're not talking anything clandestine here. So please feel free to put your name as you put the questions. All right, with that, I will start reading the questions, and I'll send the questions to Marcelo. All right, the first one might be interesting. I've done my bachelor's and master's in CS. Then I went to consulting world. Currently, I'm a technical account manager at AWS. This year, I've started studying ML seriously. I want to move into an ML role, either as an engineer or a manager. Can you please recommend what could be the best way to make this kind of move? So bachelor's, master's, CS, a technical account manager at AWS, right? And they want to actually come back to being an engineer or a manager in machine learning. They start to learn it. What could be a good way to make this move? Marcelo, what do you think? From what you know,
I think it's interesting first to see what are applications of machine learning and what are the models that's used to solve those applications. Like if you think about computer vision, you can look into applications of computer vision and look, then go into the models and try to learn what do the models do to solve. Like what
interesting.
Even for like computer vision, there are, if you think about an application, I don't know, if you think about like a self driving car, for instance, right? There's so many models are involved. Computer vision models are involved into make a self-driving car possible. You have like documents, you have a image segmentation, you have image classification, you have a bunch of other things there. So so the idea here is to get familiar with the problems themselves. So if you think about being a manager, you're going to think about how to apply machine learning to solve problems that you see, right? So you have to know what is it capable to do right now with the current current models and architectures. So I would recommend going to there first, just like look into applications, which models solve that, and try to go into details and learn how the models do what they do. Right?
That's a very interesting take. Like you're saying, start with an application that you might like, and then understand what's happening in the field of ML, which models are used, how are they used. Now, in order to understand that, Marcelo, though, one has to know the fundamentals of ML, right? Like I might be interested in vision, but if I have no idea what backprop is, like to me, it's just going to be like anything else that I read, right? So
yeah, that's also very important,
right? Yeah, so you have to understand the fundamentals of ML. But that's a very, very interesting take. Yes,
because you can't go in this like top-down kind of idea.
Right? Not completely.
You're gonna hit a barrier, like a technical understanding barrier at some point, right?
Right.
So it's also important to know the fundamentals.
Yeah. Makes sense. So anonymous attendee, I think what Marcelo and I are agreeing on is that you have to know the fundamentals, but it's also very important to understand the applications. Like start with something that you might like. That's a very interesting take to this. And so you start on like in an interesting footing to like start with applications that you just want to be a part of, right? And so you maintain that momentum and excitement after you learn the fundamentals. Okay. Currently a software engineer with 7 years of experience, but no experience in AI/ML. How would you advise someone like me to get a job? So anonymous attendee, we discussed that earlier. Let us know if that didn't answer the question. What is your background? What is your background in math, and what new concepts do you have to learn to keep up when working on ML? So that's an interesting question, Marcelo. Do you have any specific background in math, and how do you keep up with math as you go in ML? Like how
That
much
is
math do you say you do every day as well? Like
being very honest with you, that's one thing that I'm trying to get better at, because I'm not that great. But this is a very interesting point, because like I had math courses while I was doing my undergrad, lots of like calculus and linear algebra. I didn't have enough statistics, and that's one thing that I'm trying to get a lot of experience in. I've been everything that comes up that on my newsletters that I get, or Substack and Medium, that has to do with statistics. I try to dive into it and get more and more knowledge about, because it's very, very important. It's like fundamental for machine learning. I didn't have that on my undergrad. I didn't have that foundation, and it's something that I'm trying to build. But for a machine learning engineer, I think you need more math as a data scientist than as a machine learning engineer, right? As a machine learning engineer, you need to know the broad concepts of what is matrix factorization, or what is statistics, or how to work on how, let's say, graded descent works, or how basic algorithms. You have to know those by heart, kind of thing. But not very complex kind of math concepts. That is like data scientists are the ones that are more specialized in that. Machine learning engineers, they know about it. They know enough to talk in the same level with data scientists, but they are more specialized in software engineering as well. So yeah, again, it's important to have the math concepts. It's something that it's always good to have, right?
Good to have. Yeah. And unfortunately, I think probability and stats, I don't think most people did that really well in high school. Like very few instructors are very good at teaching it, and so this comes like central, in these careers. But no, pretty good. And so to answer this question very specifically, like you actually just dive head on into stats. Like if you see a Medium article, you actually comb through it and say, like, let me understand what's going on here. Like you don't avoid it. Like, you actually just take it head on and understand it. And that's what it keeps you up to date in the field and keeps your interest up.
Because I think that's the part. You have to attack your weaknesses, right? You have to go like try to bridge the gaps that you don't have, right?
Makes sense. Makes total sense. What training would you recommend for someone to go from DevOps to MLOps? Like, what's that gap that you would think people should learn?
So DevOps and MLOps are very similar, but the tools are slightly different, right? So if you think about AWS, when you move to MLOps, you're going to start thinking about SageMaker. You start thinking about OpenSearch, things that you don't deal with when you're doing DevOps most of the time, right? So what could be interesting is if you have some application, like a project that would benefit from some of those tools, like SageMaker, OpenSearch, SageMaker endpoints, those kind of things. Would be interesting to know how to deploy them, how to make them work, and how to connect them together. It's interesting that I wrote a Medium article recently. It's more DevOps than other things, and it has a lot to do with that too. It's like how to get Hugging Face models and put that in SageMaker, and then connect that to Fargate clusters. It's basically DevOps. It's a basic like DevOps walkthrough, very light in those terms, because I'm not a DevOps person.
Right. In order to learn SageMaker, like, is it not the same thing? Like, if you don't know the fundamentals of ML, like you'd hit a wall pretty quickly, you know. Like
Yeah, you have to know what you're talking about too, right? You have to know
right.
what are the models that you're going to push to a SageMaker endpoint, but you have to know more about this model is going to need a GPU. So I need to get a machine that has a GPU, and I need to push a task with that's going to match the machines that I'm going to allocate, and I'm going to see how big is the model. So I'm going to allocate a machine that is going to fit, that the model is going to fit into. So it's more thinking about the operations part, right? Thinking about memory, thinking about GPUs and CPUs and how many machines I'm going to need to run this and that. You have to be a foot inside the model. You have to understand what the model is doing too.
Right.
So you got to have the fundamentals too. But it's thinking more about the machines and,
makes sense.
Requirements.
Makes sense. There is a question from one of the live streams, like someone who has no coding background. How can he or she leverage AI for starters? Now, Varun, I will try and answer this question. Like, if you have no coding background, start with just like using the AI tools, right? and then learn some basic coding, and then start doing API work. Like, use the API for like a specific application. Like Marcelo said earlier, like, you must be curious about something, some type of application, and like learn some basic coding, use those tools with the APIs, and like just try and feel the power of some of these AI tools and get started there for it. So that's what I would say. Another one from live streams. I'm pursuing my PhD. I'm third year PhD. I'm computer vision. How do I become a computer vision engineer in a tier 1 company? Do you have any specific advice for people who are doing, say, PhD in vision?
I think that like PhD is a lot to do with the data scientists mostly are the ones with the PhDs in the field.
I suppose not necessarily, but you're saying that it's a relatively easier transition to data science versus like ML engineering if you have.
Yeah, because data science is the one that is closer to the research side of things than the rest, right? But it's important to know how to do. It's probably going to be doing that in his program as well, prototyping and like basic coding, scripting to like make the models work, right? So you have to have some contact with software developments too. But with a PhD, what I see, if he wants to get more, he or she wants to get more in touch with the software development kind of things, it would be interesting, besides from the PhD, to learn fundamentals of software development too. Because on the PhD, this person is probably already learning the fundamentals of machine learning and data science already, right? There's going to be a gap on software development that this person might want to bridge.
And even as data scientists, like one has to learn basic software development, right? And one has to learn deep learning as well. Like it's not optional or any of that. Like both ways one has to go.
It's just what I see is the level of that you apply software development. Most of the times, the code that a data science produces is not necessarily ready for production.
Of course,
as well.
They're not measured on it.
No, they don't need to, right?
Right, they need to.
They need to prototype fast with models and make them work. But I see a lot of
Got it.
data scientists getting into software development too, and that might be a gap that they want to
I see.
bridge.
I see. Fascinating. Okay, understood. Can a front-end engineer switch to ML? I mean, Shahrukh asks. Yes, Shahrukh, I think Marcelo did that, right? Marcelo, you're a full stack, I suppose, but includes front-end. Can a front-end engineer switch to ML? Like, would it be beneficial starting as ML engineer 2 level and start fresh, or is there a way to utilize both by any chance? So I think in backend is relatively more clear that it's going to be a lateral move. But for a front-end engineer, also, you think it's likely to be a lateral move when somebody moves to ML?
Yeah, I
Good
think
question.
I think it's that there has to be some knowledge about the APIs that the front end is consuming too, right? So I would see more of a full stack engineering rather than just a pure front end engineering for moving.
Okay.
So I would say I would recommend getting more involved with the full stack side of things and the back end.
And then you have a much higher chance of just making a lateral move. Then like Marcelo himself did. This question seems to be for me, or maybe Marcelo. But what are 2 courses you would recommend to get abreast with ML engineer role to prep for the IK program? I mean, to prep for the IK program, see, IK program itself is a prep, right? I mean, we start from scratch for the most part. If you want to do something, just do math, right? Like Marcelo said, like math can be difficult to grasp in a relatively shorter time. So if you could do some math before coming, I think that'll be helpful. If you don't have coding background, like do some coding work before that. That is also going to be helpful. But as someone who is familiar with the curriculum, I wouldn't say anything much more is required, right? Marcelo, do you feel anything more is required to like prep for the interview Kickstart program, like beyond math?
No, I think that's it's not very heavy on math, but having math, it's very welcome, and software development too. I think those are solid advice.
Okay, awesome. Is it worth switching from a Linux platform developer? Ravindran is asking, is this Linux platform developer? Is it worth switching from Linux platform developer to any related roles in the area, MLAR roles in the area? Marcel, do you know much about Linux platform development? Are you familiar with that side of the world?
A little, not a lot.
Any specific advice like for you?
Yeah, something around MLOps might be, because like all the servers that I deploy my stuff is all Linux servers, right? But I'm not an expert in that area, but I know how to work that. So maybe that side would be more interesting, the MLOps side.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcel, for that. Can you please repeat this is Gopal. Gopal, thank you for stating your name. Yeah. Can you please repeat the roles, the responsibilities of ML and data science engineer? Yes, maybe Marcelo, a quick 30-second on that would be useful.
Yes.
Distinction.
So data science is more math heavy. It's more research heavy and trying out models, new techniques for model development. While software engineering is going to get that model developed by data scientists and put that in a system that is going to be integrated into the larger product or organization.
Okay. All right. Gopal, we discussed this earlier a little bit more detail, so hopefully this was useful. Gideon, I'm going to skip your first question. It's I think one can fairly easily Google for it. Let's focus on second, which is more interesting. Do I necessarily need a master's or an advanced degree in ML to get a job?
I think it helps, but you don't need to. There are some jobs that will require you have a master's or you have a PhD, but I would say maybe most of them, like maybe 60-70% of the roles, they don't require you to have a master's. But they require you to know about the libraries and to know about fundamentals of machine learning. They're going to test you on that on the interview.
Right.
So That's not a
Great.
requirement for most of the jobs, but it's good to have the
Got it.
fundamentals.
Awesome. What about QA engineer in ML? Very good question, anonymous attendee. I'd actually missed that. Test engineering, QA engineering. Like, what do you see the role of a test engineer in this world?
It's a very I was reading an article yesterday about that. There is a lot of testing for, especially for large language models. There's a lot of benchmarking. There are benchmarks that are used out there to, like, if you develop a new model, you gotta know how you compare with the current ones that are being used, right? So there's a lot of QA on that, or QA on, let's say, if you think about a large language model, if it is producing the outputs that you want it to produce, or if it is hallucinating too much, or if it is producing things that are not part of what you have asked it to, right? So the QA, I think, has a lot of that, a lot of benchmarking of your model. There is a lot of testing the outputs to see if it is within the boundaries that you want it to be. And also there's a lot of model monitoring as well for drift and those kind of things. There's lots of tools that are used for checking if the model is drifting into something that is different than the input data. There's a lot of tools to model monitoring as well that QA could be.
And this is a role that is different from ML ops and ML engineering, I think, or
yeah,
is it
right
like
now
a specialization of this?
I don't see a lot of roles as saying QA engineer for ML, like in specific. But those things that I mentioned to you, they're always present, right? But I haven't seen a lot of roles that are specific for that. Maybe in bigger companies there are some. I also haven't looked because I'm not a QA engineer. So,
Right.
But there might be some. But those kinds of benchmarks and monitoring is stuff that is always present on the role of machine learning engineer as well, and data scientists.
Got it. Very interesting. Do you see that role coming up in the future?
It could be, maybe I would say for bigger companies, that could be a role that people are talking more and more about it, especially with models like GPT that is like this it somehow works as a black box of sorts, right? So you need QA to figure out that it's doing what it wanted to do in the end. But companies that are going to develop those big models are going to be big companies too. So there might be a opportunity there.
Awesome. Very good question. I am scanning through other questions. A lot of these questions are very specific to your situations, asking, I'm this, how do I become an ML engineer? The advice generally is the same everywhere. You need to learn the fundamentals first. And what Marcelo added today was very important, very interesting and important, is try and start with an application that you might like, and then go from there. I will skip a few questions and I'll take some which are slightly different from that. For example, one, do you see benefits of focusing on industry specialty, like say healthcare and finance, in this, like as part of transition? Is that a
I personally, I don't. I know some people who got more focused on that. I knew some job opportunities that would ask me if I prefer this or that. I would say no, because I don't have a preference, and they're mostly okay with that. So I think the applications are more agnostic of the field that they are being applied to. Especially because machine learning engineer, data scientists, ML ops, they're very technical roles, right? You need more knowledge about the business when you get up higher up into the chain, more management. You need to know more about the business, and probably that's going to be more specialization on certain kinds of industries.
Got it. So you haven't faced any bottlenecks because you didn't know a particular industry or such as such. Like
No,
they would ask you, but they would not.
they normally ask as like good to know, like preferred, like what do you say, preferred skills rather than required skills.
Got it. Got it.
That's more that on that side.
What about managers? Imagine somebody managing a team somewhere, manager, senior manager, wanting to move to ML. What is your advice on how should they approach that?
I think it's very important for a manager of an ML team. It's very important to know ML. And it's very important to know applications of ML too, like similar to the other question that I answered a few minutes ago. Maybe it's important to know the fundamentals too, because you need to, if you're managing a team, your team is gonna use some technologies. You better know what they are to manage your team effectively, right? So it's good to have the fundamentals, in my opinion. Also, me as a person that is managed by others mostly, because I'm an individual contributor, it's very good when my manager knows the fundamentals of ML, so I can talk to them in the same level. So I would say it's pretty important for that too. I think it can do your job better. Sense. Know what you're talking about, right?
I couldn't agree more, man. Like as a manager, you have to gain respect of your team, and the best way to gain respect of your team is being technical enough. Right? Nobody's expecting you to be deeply technical, but like enough so that you can sit with the engineer and talk about it at the same level. Like work in the trenches, like debate the design and such. And so like that type of the work environment also is much better, and respect is much better. You grow much faster as well through the ranks. So understood. Certifications. Do certifications help? Are they like necessary? Yeah, in your view, like say cloud fundamentals, some cloud fundamental certifications and stuff, or is it more like a nice to have?
I don't see it. It's more like nice to have, but there's not a lot of like. There are some certifications on the MLOps side, but when you go into MLE and data science, there is nothing. Like the field is moving so fast too. It's hard for something to solidify enough to someone to come up with a certification to it. So I don't see a lot of certifications. Maybe on the MLOps side, there are some, like AWS certification, GCP, things like that.
But on the MLOps side, getting AWS GCP would be slightly better. Like it's again not, I'm guessing not necessary or critical, but like nice to have, or you think no, it is necessary to have. It would be much better to have it.
I would say it's more nice to have than necessary.
Got it. And I think there's a bunch of questions, Marcelo, on like how do I get in without experience? Like I take a course or whatever I do, right? But I don't have experience. It's like the chicken and egg problem. Right? How do I now get in? Like, what do I show when I don't have? Yes, I have the fundamentals, right? But what do I show to make this switch? Like, what did you show to make that switch? Yeah.
Like if you have a course, for instance, you can put that in your resume, right? That you have a course that you have learned this and that. This part of the course. Another thing that you can put, that you can also showcase, if you have projects in your GitHub, let's say, you can list some projects that you have worked on. If you don't have work experience with ML, at least you have some projects, like personal projects that you have worked on that you can showcase. There are some interesting things that you want to write about as well. This you can put in your resume too.
I see. Right, like just blogs where you might have written and just put the link up to the blog. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I normally put the link to my Medium on my resume too.
That's awesome. Would you share your Medium blog? So just for people here.
Yes, it's at Marcelo Lotif. Let me write that here.
Sure. Awesome. Folks, we've gone like 20 minutes over time. Let me take just one last question from this, which is about fresh grads, college grads. It's like, Marcelo, any specific advice for college grads looking for roles in ML?
Yeah, I think maybe if there's like the projects, I don't know how it's the undergrad in here, but the undergrad back in Brazil, where I did mine, they always have a project at the end of the course,
Many of
right?
them, yeah, many in the US as well do, yeah.
If you do like the way that I did, I just, when I was going to choose a professor to be the mentor of that, I went to talk to the AI professor, the professor for the AI course, and ask him if he had any projects that I could work on. And that was the first interest that I had, was when I did my end of course project with the AI professor, right? Besides that, maybe internships might help if you get internships in companies that are focused on ML might help you as well.
That's, I suppose, I mean, in some ways the same problem. Like, how do you even get internships when you don't have sort of experience? And these days, I mean, I think fresh grads are struggling a little bit with jobs because of how the market is as such. But your point about project is actually very, very spot on. Like, having done interesting projects is really the key to bridging this gap in having no experience and then showing that you can still do it because you have done interesting projects. Like at IK, we do capstone project, which is fairly involved. And then multiple such projects can also be done. Awesome, folks. In the interest of time, like we've gone 20 minutes over, I would love to wrap it up. Marcelo, thank you so much for your time. This is very, very helpful. Very impressive career that you've built in the field. Thank you for guiding all of us. Like, very interesting nuances which I personally hadn't even thought about as well today, despite sort of coaching a lot of people. So I found it very useful. Folks, as you know, IK runs courses on fundamentals of ML. We are also introducing new courses which will specifically focus on your domain. So like front-end engineering and ML for front-end engineering, like relatively shorter course, which helps you go through different applications of ML engineering as front-end engineering using ML tools, or for cybersecurity, and so just very specifically ML for cybersecurity. It's very specific this thing. So we call them enable up courses. That is also coming up. Also, Marcelo, any final words for people?
No, it's just was great. Questions great as well. It was nice talking to everyone. It was very, very interesting conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you for giving us time late in the night. It's like 11:20. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Have a good one.
Thanks, everyone. Have a very, very good night. Bye.